Okay, thanks very much, Larry. It is great to be back with everyone. And again, this is one of the highlights of the year is being able to come and share what's going on. I've always enjoyed since we entered this very uncertain time looking at all the TV interviews. Everybody has their books behind them. So I figured we'd do the same. This is the Communication Technology Update and Fundamentals that I produce in cooperation with Technology Futures. And Larry talks about the curves and the projections since 1993. We actually did the first edition of that in 1992, and it's sometimes fun to go back and see the changes that have taken place. So in the next 45 to 50 minutes, we're going to talk about some of the latest things going on, leave some time for questions, discussion, disagreements, or, if Steve's still on, we'll have blatant pitches for new products. So let's give me just a second, share my screen. We're going to share this screen, click share, and then I'm going to start the show. Okay, so you can see a beautiful cover of the 17th edition of the book. A lot of math behind how we got to 17 from 1992. But the big thing we want to talk about, obviously, is pandemic has had a tremendous impact. And a lot of what I could talk about has already been discussed by some of the previous presenters, but I want to put a few things into context, give some bigger pictures. One of the things we know, not just this meeting, but everything we've been doing for the past 10 months or so, we've been Zooming. I just took a list of all of the connections that I happen to use in about a 2-week period. And you can see there are all of these tools that are available that we used them somewhat a year ago, but today we're using them more than ever. That's a fundamental change. What we have is the disruption that's been caused by the pandemic has created an acceleration of change. So there are things that we expected to happen sooner or later that are happening sooner rather than later. It also means that from an economic perspective, a lot of weaker competitors are not going to last. In order to go through really tough economic times, you've got to be able to have really good economic stability and support, and some of that's going to come through consolidation. And there, again, we've had a lot of discussion of that early. The other thing that happens, though, is huge opportunities for new entrants. I follow a lot of people on my Twitter feed, and one of the people that I follow is a PR executive in London. And he did a tweet earlier this week linking to an article about how now is the best time to start an agency. And I responded, no, it's the best time to start any business. Because if we can believe the projections, and I happen to worship at the altar of Dr. Fauci, this pandemic will soon be behind us. So any groundwork we lay now can lead to significant payoff in the future. So let's start out. I want to talk about some technologies in general, but first talk about things that the pandemic has affected more than other things. And we're going to do this in 2 phases. First, we're going to look at what is the impact now, and then where is it going to be once we get past the pandemic. So I've got 5 areas here. I won't bore you by reading them twice. Let's start with work from home. We've always had telecommuting. We have more telecommuting than ever, but it's not equal telecommuting. Some jobs are more compatible with telecommuting than others. Some jobs you need to have more social interaction, and over time, we're going to have more and more need for the social interaction, when we hire new people, when we bring new people in. Again, so much of how we communicate, how we share is our informal interactions with each other, and they help to inform our formal interactions. But we do have a lot of issues we have to face here. The equipment is one. I had an interview with a reporter about 9 months ago, right after the start, saying, are there any big issues employers should worry about? And I said, yeah. Who owns the equipment? Is an employer buying the computer you're using? What about the router? What about the broadband connection? Arguably, if you're working from home, does your employer have a responsibility to pay for some of that technology? Related to that, employers have to turn it around and say, what about security? If you're used to working in a highly secure environment, let's say you're a vice president of a bank, you're used to working with financial information, and then you go home. How secure does your router have to be? You want to have a much more secure environment. So we have to worry about that. There's obviously the issue of control that comes up whenever we talk about telecommuting. There are a lot of employers who trust that you give an employee a task, they're going to do the job, and they get it done. And if they don't, you'll know it and can interact with them as needed. There are others that, unless they see you at the desk at 8 o'clock in the morning, that was my first job out of college, communications job, and the boss said 8 a.m. I don't care how late you have to stay, but you have to be at your desk at 8 a.m. So we have different people who have different degrees of control. There's finally the issue of the network. What is the demand on the network? And again, Gary gave a really good overview of some of the issues involved there, so I'm not going to repeat any of that. Second thing is remote learning. This is most apparent to everyone in the K through 12 education. What happens when students have to learn from home? And I live this every day. My other day job, other than being a professor of journalism, is I run the Center for Teaching Excellence at the University of South Carolina. So over the past 10 months, 11 months, we've had to take about 2,000 faculty, half of whom had never taught online before, and help them learn how to teach remotely. And, we explain there are many ways to do it. You can do synchronous, as this conference is. You can do asynchronous, where you prepare modules and students go through it at their own pace. You can have hybrid models. But what has come out of this is an awareness of some techniques that have been there all along, but we're using more than ever for engagement. How do you get people involved? One of the things I love some of Carrie's comments about how we talk, how we're using the breakout rooms. She's really into maximizing the engagement of this conference, same way a teacher is. Well, these same techniques that we're picking up through education are going to be used in communication throughout industry. There are also in education new methods of assessment. Instead of having everything be a multiple choice or essay test, there are a lot more opportunities for group projects and for other ways to evaluate whether learning took place. And gamification is much easier in the online environment. Biggest issue, though, we have to realize is not every student has the same access to devices and networks. And there's some, and again, this is not randomly distributed across an area. There's some school districts that have a much greater proportion of students who don't have good access or don't have the devices. There's some students who their only way to participate in class is to look at their phone and be able to follow the whole class along, because that's all they have. So as much as we have advantages and opportunities, there's a dark side to this. The digital divide may be exacerbated. Third area is e-commerce. Again, don't have to tell any of you, you've all gone shopping. You know that e-commerce has grown 54% in about the past year. Brick and mortar store sales have declined. Restaurants, they're doing much more takeout than ever before. And we have the rise of DoorDash and the other delivery services. At last we had a reason for Jean-Luc and Luke Skywalker to come together in one message saying, please order your food through Uber Eats. These delivery services, again, have helped to stimulate the economy. They have helped some of the restaurant jobs. We don't need as many servers, but we still need the management staff, the cook staff, and again, enough of the servers to help out. So there are impacts on all areas of e-commerce. I just point that out as an example. Streaming video, we had a lot of examples. Obviously, people being at home more. Just think about it. If someone is telecommuting, they're recovering on average half an hour, maybe an hour a day that they would otherwise spend in the car. Now, some people are using that to work more. Some people are using it to relax more. but we do know that the amount of television viewed has gone up. And again, most of it, not all of it, but a good bit of it has been streaming. It's not just the fact that we're at home. The closure of the cinemas has moved that experience to home. And there's a lot more content that have come across, and obviously new services. I mean, let's break it down. I think I am the third or fourth person to have a slide like this in the conference, and it's always interesting to see which services we choose to include or not include. We have new services coming online every day. Stars want, when I watch Outlander, Stars wants me to just watch it on their app. We have the Discovery coming out with new services in a month. Paramount Plus launching out of CBS All Access. The biggest surprise out of all this, though, is Quibi. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Quibi. The name stands for Quick Bites. The idea was, let's take programming and do it in short chunks, 5 to 10 minutes. So we'll do sitcoms in short pieces. We'll do game shows in short pieces. We'll have comedy shows. So whenever you have 5 or 10 minutes, you simply pull out your device and you can enjoy a quick bite of content. $2 billion was invested in this. One of the brightest minds in entertainment, Jeffrey Katzenberg, was behind it. And they had a wealth of content. And they launched at the beginning of the pandemic, the time when people started to spend more time consuming online content. And they said, what could be better for us? And the audience said, yeah, we don't want to pay a monthly fee to get 5 or 10 minute clips. So they went away. It's been a catastrophe for the movie industry. You see the figures on the revenues. The domestic box office cratered because of the pandemic. It won't come back until people can sit next to each other and laugh together, cry together, and of course cheer for the end of some movies. Big movies that have been designed and are expected to make $500 million to $1 billion have been held because they need that cinematic distribution in order to make that $1 billion. So we're not going to see James Bond in No Time to Die or Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow until we get cinemas open. But as was mentioned earlier, a lot of movies are being shifted to streaming, to the streaming window. Mulan was released by Disney Online. HBO and HBO Max took Warner Brothers' Wonder Woman 1984 that came out in theaters and online. There are lots of complications in terms of how the contracts for the performers work and the producers and the people who get paid a percentage. But this has not been good for the cinema industry, but it's been incredibly good for the production industry. And we'll get back to that in a second. Let's move on. Telehealth. We've always had a little bit of telehealth since the first modems appeared in households, but we're getting more and more. The idea that if you think you have COVID-19, that a doctor wants to diagnose you remotely instead of you having you come into the office, that's a big change. But telehealth goes a lot further than that. We have wearables. I got my Christmas present. It's a little Fitbit watch. Will do an EKG on me. It will tell me how I'm sleeping. It will give me my blood oxygen level. I can't wait till one does my blood pressure and can tell me when I need to leave a meeting. We have fitness devices that are also giving feedback and have the potential to make us healthier. The bottom line is we have more capability to monitor individual health and feed that information into a database. The question is, are those databases going to be for businesses like Fitbit, which has just been acquired by Google? So do we want Google to know our blood pressure all the time? The insurance industry is going to be a big driver of this because they see a tremendous potential for cost savings. Obviously, it costs a lot less to prevent an illness than to treat an illness. And with all these technologies, we have the potential to have a greater ability at prevention. These are some of the devices. I love that one in the middle, the little Cardia. I mentioned my watch will do the 2-lead EKG. little cardio device will give me a 6-lead EKG. Went to see my cardiologist last summer, and he did an EKG on me, and he made a point to tell me that was 12 lead. And I said, well, here on my phone is my 6th lead, and he had never seen it. So little detail, but what it says is we're having the greater ability than ever to monitor our health. And in order to make it work, this is a classic Internet of Things where you have to have embedded in the device the sensors, but also the networking to connect, interpret the information, and allow you to take action. Okay, so let's look ahead. Let's see, where are we going from here? Let's take those same 5 things. Working from home, all those issues I talked about, especially the need for social interaction, are going to push some people back into the office, but there's some businesses that have said, you know what? We realize we don't have to have everybody here in order to work effectively, and they're going to see it strictly as a cost savings. My guess is that they have to pay significant attention to the social interaction, or they're not going to have as much effectiveness from their workforce. There's also the issue of worker empowerment that you get from working from home, that you can control not only when you work, but where you work. And that level of worker empowerment, again, in an advanced workforce, it's something that helps people become more productive. But there's some people who prefer to keep much more control. In remote teaching, we're going to have lots of impacts from the pandemic. The fact that we've been able to do remote learning, I was in a seminar this morning. We had a new faculty academy seminar here where some of our new faculty are trained in teaching techniques. And someone brought up the idea that they sure do want this remote teaching to continue for students who come down with a cold or flu. You know, to heck with the pandemic, if somebody is sniffling, let them attend class from home. I also think homework's going to evolve significantly simply because we have new ways to help people work together, new ways to create experiences, and we can use these. So the books are going to be important, the tests are going to be important, but creating experiences is a key thing that we're taking away from remote teaching during the pandemic. E-commerce. I want to stress that there's basic marketing theory says there are 2 types of shoppers. You have hedonic and utilitarian. A hedonic shopper shops because they like to shop. They like to go to the store. They like to feel. They like to try on different things. It's a whole experience. A utilitarian shopper, on the other hand, utilitarian shopper says, here's what I want. I'm going to buy this specific thing, and I want to be done as quickly as I can. You know, I can't think of a better example of this than shoes. When my wife buys shoes, that is a pleasurable experience for her. She will go and try on a dozen pair of shoes. She will look at them in the mirror. A shoe trip is a minimum of an hour, maybe 2. And again, she has earned it, you know, just putting up with me for no other reason. On the other hand, when I need a shoe, I need a Florsheim Riva or Como 11.5 narrow, and I can go online, find the best price, hit an order button, and they're at the house. If I'm Amazon Prime the next day, if I have to go through JCPenney, it'll take a week, as long as JCPenney's still around. The point is, as the pandemic ends, we will continue to use online shopping for the utilitarian motives. But those people who enjoy shopping for the sake of shopping are going to be going back to the stores. So you're going to see high-end retailing coming back as strong as ever. Fashion's going to be big. I would even say the auto buying experience, you know, part of the fun of buying an automobile is not just saying, here's what I want, but it's trying different cars, seeing how they drive, seeing how they feel. We've got to realize that these motivations can result in things you can only get when you're there in person. Streaming content. Again, I bring this up. Can't do a presentation on media today without talking about Bridgerton. And if you don't know what Bridgerton is, shame on you. But these are 4 examples of shows that people have really picked up on since the beginning of the pandemic. Tiger King, gosh, not only did Tiger King have a huge spur of popularity, but we had the limo waiting outside his prison with an expectation of a pardon a week ago that never came. What all of these shows have in common is these all came out on streaming. And this is this very small example. I guess if I'm putting personal favorites in here, I would have put Ozark at the center. We're in a golden age of content. And despite the fact that cinemas are closed, the people who used to work cinematically are creating these wonderful masterpieces that are being distributed that are finding an audience. So again, media consumption is going up. And I do want, I'm going to check the chat at the end to see if anybody says anything about Bridgerton. By the way this presentation works, I can't see the chat window while I'm talking, but if you have questions, feel free to type them in as I go, and I'll hit them as soon as we wrap up. The big thing I want you to take away on this too many streaming options is the idea that we have this disintermediation going on, where instead of being a cable company or satellite company aggregating all possible services into a bundle that they're selling you, you have the ability to buy individual bundles. You can get an ESPN bundle and an HBO Max bundle. You can get a Disney Plus bundle and even a Discovery bundle. So we're ending up with so many options, and what we're going to have, just as we had with other industries that were disrupted at the advent of the internet, like the airline industry, a period of re-intermediation that will start probably in about a year. And again, as I think Gary made the comment earlier, you will find that there will be a number of companies that aggregate these services. So you pay one price and you get the set of services that pleases you the most. Telehealth. The investments that are being made right now, and keep in mind the pandemic is a health crisis. So massive investments are being made into health. Some of those investments are going to persist. Some of the benefits are going to persist. But we're going to have significant cost savings that are possible from shifting the place where health is offered and the administration. That is, when I'm able to do an EKG on myself, when I'm able to take my own blood pressure, when I can have daily health stats going to the doctor, that reduces some of the need for personnel. And again, it gives us the ability, if consumers are willing, and again, and those of you who have studied healthcare know one of the biggest issues in healthcare is compliance. It doesn't matter whether you have a pill that will get somebody, make somebody healthier. They won't get healthier unless they take the pill or do whatever, exercise or physical therapy. But with all of these technologies, we have an increased ability to focus on prevention and intervention. And as I've said before, it's much less expensive to prevent someone from having an illness than to treat the illness once the illness already exists. So I see this as being a huge, huge area. And I'll talk a tiny bit more about it near the end. All right. I want to focus on TV, though. Those are the big pandemic impacts. Let's put the pandemic aside and just look at how technology is progressing. And for me, television is the most ubiquitous technology in 99% of homes. The average adult in the US watches about 4.5 hours of television a day. That's constantly been going up on a year-by-year basis since the 1970s. Minutes per year, but again, over a 50-year period, couple minutes a year adds up to real time. So we have three big things that are going on that all affect each other. Let's take them one at a time. The biggest thing that I haven't heard anybody mention yet today is the new broadcast standard, ATSC 3.0. Broadcasters are literally going to be able to stop using their current way of transmitting, pick up a new way to transmit that will let them send 4K out to any viewers, let them send 120 frames a second. It can include the the HDR, which is a greater fidelity of the picture. You have more color options, deeper blacks, whiter whites, etc. You see all the list on the screen. ATSC 3.0 was approved about 2 years ago. The first sets were introduced at CES last year. This year there were even more, and TV stations are starting to switch over. This represents a challenge because you have the ability for two-way communication and for broadcasters to provide some broadband services that would otherwise be provided. Whether they're going to be able to compete and that 6 megahertz of bandwidth that they have for broadcast is another question, but this is a major technology. Again, it's not a slam dunk. ATSC is incompatible with current TV systems, so you have to have a separate transmission channel, and users aren't aware of it, but it will enable a repack of the spectrum used for TV and has the potential to create yet another auction. And we've already had 2 auctions of TV channels, and we know the results of the C-band channel that just concluded. So biggest thing for broadcasters, so, is the revenue opportunity you have with targeted advertising. I'll spend a second on that in a minute. We have this whole discussion earlier about 8K TV, and yeah, it's really wonderful, and I'm not a big fan. And the reason is that you can't really see the difference between a 4K and an 8K unless you're right up next to the screen. You actually can't see the difference between HD and 4K unless you're within about a foot, maybe 18 inches of a screen, depending upon the size of the screen. So the 8K gives us the ability to have more information, but if you're watching TV from 6 to 12 feet away, you can't see the difference. That doesn't mean it's not an important technology, though. And there are a number of waves in displays that are coming on top of each other. First, there are new ways of making screens, the OLED, mini LED, and QLED. You know, I'm sure that next year we'll hear about a GLED and an XLED. The bottom line is LEDs on a screen that are brighter, have more range, greater fidelity. We're going to have prettier pictures. The 8K will be a display technology. It will be used extensively in digital signage. Will also be used in production when you can shoot a scene in ultra high definition, and then in post-production you can decide what part of that scene is actually going to be shown on TV. That's useful. So I don't see 8K as being as much a technology for the home, with one exception. It gives you something when you walk into Best Buy for that person in Best Buy to say, so what kind of TV do you have now? Oh, you only have 4K. Well, 8K is twice as much. And then they'll get you 5 inches away and say, can you see the difference? And that'll be the one time in your whole life that you look at it from 5 inches away. We see frame rate is going up. That's actually going to give us more realistic images, although we know from studies that if you get too much realism, people become disoriented. It's one of the issues with VR we'll talk about in a second. The key issue with 8K and with all of these others is you got to have content. And the way they're going to be delivered first is streaming, because streaming doesn't have the limitations you have in broadcast and cable. As long as you can compress the signal, you can get it through the pipe. I mentioned that I'd say a word about addressable advertising. The whole idea that every person consuming a particular content can see something different is something revolutionary. In about 3 weeks, we'll all be getting ready for the Super Bowl. We're going to be so excited to watch the Chiefs play the Bills, or whatever's going to happen. Actually, the Chiefs play the Bills this weekend. Chiefs have to play one of the Bays, so I'll say it's the Chiefs in Green Bay. Anyway, everybody's going to be talking about those commercials, and you're going to have these 60 different commercials that are released during that 3 hours, and we're going to talk about how well produced, and we're all watching the same commercials. That's really cool for the Super Bowl. But if you really want to be effective, you want to give the Lipitor commercials only to people who have issues with high cholesterol. You want to give the hair color commercials only to people who color their hair. You want to give the beer commercials to people who are likely to drink beer. And addressable advertising gives you the opportunity to deliver a different commercial message to each person who's consuming the content. Now, biggest challenge you have in addressable advertising are the algorithms that are driving it, because right now the algorithms are designed to look at what you bought, and on the basis of what you bought, show you a lot of those ads. I've really been enjoying the past month. I bought my wife a paddleboard for Christmas. So that's a one-time purchase. The only paddleboard I've ever bought, probably the only one I ever will buy. But since then, the company that makes those paddle boards has been in my advertising anytime I go to a site that uses one of the particular ad delivery services. So we have to work on the back end. And one of the most aggressive companies there is Warner Media. They have a Xandr tool that they created in their Turner Broadcasting subsidiary a couple years ago that they continue to advance. So when you're looking at the value AT&T gives to the world, I think one of the most hidden nuggets in the AT&T portfolio is their ability to deliver the addressable advertising. We know that in any digital stream, everybody can get a different stream. You get TuneIn Radio, you're going to hear a different spot from the person down the street based upon how they have profiled you as a user. And again, there's significant revenue potential here. And broadcasters will be able to do this as well with the adoption of ATSC 3.0. The question is how they make it work, how they develop the intelligence to make sure that the messages are the right messages delivered to the right person. So let's shift gears. Video games. This is a huge year for video games with the introduction of the new PS5 and the Xbox consoles. These consoles, and I should have put pictures up here, but I kind of assumed you all knew what they looked like, or if not, you're not a gamer. So you do need to know the quality of the graphics is improving significantly, and much more realistic experience. The role-playing games are more realistic than you could ever imagine. The games have the potential to rely on a cloud-based architecture, but because of some latency issue, there's still some games that there's some people that say better to get the PS5 that has the disc in it. I'm not a gamer. I don't know the difference. What I'd like to do is study the impact of these things. Fortnite was able to bring 12.3 million people all together for a Travis Scott concert last April. And I expect it to only grow from there. And this is an interesting experience. It wasn't a concert, it was a concert event. Fortnite's revenue is significant. They owe over $1 billion in 2019. I haven't seen the 2020 numbers yet, but they got into a battle with the Apple Store because the Apple Store wanted to take 30% of their revenues just for putting the app on the store. And at a certain point, Fortnite said, you know what, we shouldn't have to pay Apple 30% of our revenue just because we're on the Apple ecosystem. And Apple said, yes, you do. And so far, the courts have sided with Apple, but a lot of money at stake here. And again, people keep playing, the revenues keep flowing. So again, if we look across all platforms, all games, the software, the hardware, everything together, about 180 billion. You say, wow, that's huge. And in comparison with other things, it is. But let's put it into context. If you look at the movie box office, again, last year was a down year at 2 billion. Normally it's up between 10 and 11 billion. You see video games and VR together about 180 billion. All advertising together about $500 billion, but the telecommunication industry is about 1.4 trillion. And I didn't put on here because it would dwarf everything else. If I put health care, that's about 10 trillion. So you see that if there's a place you want to play, a place that you want to focus, we all like talking about the movies. The movies are almost a rounding error now compared to what's going on in video games. And again, health is where the huge bucks are. I did want to talk for a second about extended reality. This includes all of the technologies on the screen. And frankly, the technological advances have been good, but the user take-up has not been good. Let's start with VR. I love showing this. We have put on boot camps here at the University of South Carolina that teach faculty how to create virtual experiences that they can use in teaching. So we've had a lot of fun with that. But the primary applications have been for games, and these have been very limited. We know that if you put somebody in a virtual experience, the most they can be in that experience is about 10 minutes, maybe 15, before some disorientation sets in. We know it's really good to train people. We know virtual experiences are fantastic when you're trying to sell something. Architecture cannot live without it. If you're going to have a new building of any sort, whether it's a house or an office building, and you can take the CAD program and dump it into a VR system. So you have the ability to walk around, check the angles, look at how things are actually going to look in the building. And in the long term, I think that the visualization capability, how we can take and have three-dimensional visualization using VR, is going to be one of the most exceptional applications. Again, we're doing a lot of investigation at the University of South Carolina into how VR can be used. We have what we call the Virtual Environments Interest Group that meets monthly. We fund faculty to create courses using the technology. But the bottom line is, from a commercial perspective, the take rate of these has not been as much as people predicted about 10 years ago. People like the action and interaction of video games. So it's one to watch, but I would keep focus on the training. Couple limitations that have led to the problems. The biggest is the health issues, that about 10% of all people have a problem with dizziness when they put on the goggles. You also have people can be injured during use. There are issues of accessibility. What do you do when someone has either a visual impairment or hearing impairment? So this doesn't mean that it's not a useful technology. It means that it's not going to be a mass technology compared to some of the others we've talked about. Augmented reality, on the other hand, we have the ability to overlay information on any scene where we, with goggles or with the smartphone, we can take add information anywhere. This is going to have huge applications for people traveling where they can put on goggles and every sign is suddenly in their native tongue. We can have a similar thing that will translate speech as well. So we have all kinds of ways to use augmented reality. Not huge market yet, but that's coming. The last presentation, Larry made a mention of the Internet of Things, how many devices we have. Again, we know that we're embedding both the computing power, the sensors, and the networking into so many devices, and they're revolutionizing everything from homes, health, your automobiles. You know, I like to talk about the personal assistants. There's a lot of focus on the devices, but it goes much further. And again, what we have to look at is the demand on the network and where the processing takes place. And I want to make a point that the more we have edge computing, that not only reduces overall network demand, but also reduces latency. So we're going to see a lot more investigation. I like to compare this to electricity 100 years ago. When you first brought an electrical wire to a house, it was used for lights. And everybody knew, well, that's what electricity did. Edison gave us electricity, he gave us light bulbs. Once we had the ability to have motors, though, we used those motors for a lot of different things. We used them for refrigeration. We created electric heating. We then had radios. We had Victrolas. Again, the number of applications that use electricity kept growing. Well, the obvious thing we want to jump to is when we're looking at the internet, once we have internet connectivity, what can we do when we're connecting devices? You know, will it be common 50 years from now for every mirror to be internet connected? Will it be common for every refrigerator to be internet connected, or maybe every medicine cabinet? So again, The potential is there. We can look at any example of a smart home. Thanks to Helen Mary for creating this pictorial that shows you all the different places you can put it. I'm still trying to figure out the smart washer. I know, I guess a smart washer can tell me when the clothes are done, but also a real smart washer can wash it only when electricity is cheap, or can monitor the water and only wash until things are clean. I don't know. I'll have to ask LG or Whirlpool or GE about that. The point is, we have the potential throughout the house to add all of these technologies, and they're going to revolutionize a lot of what we do throughout the house. The personal assistants are the most interesting to me because they deliver information no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing. And it's the delivery of information that I'm most interested in. We see over time that Amazon got off to a great start with its Alexa device, but now Google is helping, with its Hey Google to take a market share. The others are coming in as well. So we see that the adoption is increasing. Number of devices per home is increasing, and it's an issue, not an issue of having one, but having one where you want it. Some other things we want to look at very quickly. 5G has really been addressed about as thoroughly by previous speakers. The only thing I want to stress is the last point on this. There's so much attention to the network, but I see 5G as being more of a marketing tool. I love what Steve said. You gotta go to T-Mobile and get your new handset, because hey, if you're not 5G, you're way behind the times. And it's a great marketing message. As a practical matter, eventually we'll be using the spectrum the same way we move from 3G to 4G. But again, it gives people a reason to upgrade, and also gives a new product, new set of services for the providers. Yeah. and if you're going to do it, you got to get it from T-Mobile, right, Steve? I say that I own AT&T as my stock of choice, because I wanted to own a piece of HBO and CNN. So isn't it funny? I'm really into the media business. In order to be in media, I got to be in business with AT&T. So, all right, automotive telematics. Again, a heck of a lot going on with autonomous vehicles, and knowing that it's not just about the vehicle driving itself, but the vehicles communicating with each other, with traffic control, networks of chargers. I've got one of those semi-electric cars. It's a plug-in hybrid. So if I'm going less than 20 miles, I can drive on electricity, and it's nice to know where those chargers are, and nice to only buy gas once every 2 or 3 months. That's a fun thing. Eventually, the time what we would spend commuting, if we still commute, is going to become media time. Or if you're really obsessed, you can make that work time. But we have all kinds of assistive technology coming in, and a lot of manufacturers are really proud of the technology they're building into the cars. They're advertising safety, but frankly, it's the entertainment. One of the big features from the Consumer Electronics Show that ended last week were the automobile manufacturers that had screens that stretch across the dashboard. So the entire dashboard is one screen. I think Mercedes was the first to announce it, but others will be coming behind them. By the way, the picture you're seeing now is a Mercedes concept car. You notice the complete lack of a steering wheel or of a side door. I can't figure that out. Okay, artificial intelligence. Again, Larry made reference to this about an hour ago. You've got to realize that AI is going to play a huge role in decision systems, because where action is needed, AI can supplement or replace what an individual does. And again, we put our first chapter on AI in the new edition of the update. It's the first time we've had one, and it discusses the difference between how these algorithms learn. But the issue is, the AI is not one technology. AI is a series of technologies that's going to help improve. I give you a little list here: speech recognition, facial recognition, data analytics, and of course robotics. Facial recognition, one of the most problematic technologies we have out there right now. A lot of people are extolling its use, but it's one of the most discriminatory technologies, because the people who did the initial training trained it on people that look like them. And frankly, one of the great things we have in this world is a rainbow of people. And we need to make sure that we have a rainbow of people involved in creating these technologies. We don't have, sorry for the editorial, we don't have that in facial recognition. Blockchain and cryptocurrency. I love this little company, One World, because they've said we're going to completely monetize the advertising experience. I could probably have put Bitcoin up there too. Bitcoins are worth a lot more. I think the One World cryptocurrency is worth less than a dime, and Bitcoin is worth about $40,000 per coin. So, but we do know that the whole idea of using blockchain to store information, to make information more secure, is a trend that's going to continue. And the use of cryptocurrency, especially in times of uncertainty, is going to increase. There's a whole batch of issues related to regulation. Again, I thought yesterday's presentation covered everything really well. The only thing I want to underscore is the issue of privacy and equity. We do have to be aware of what users' rights are, and there are places like in the special rules in California, the rules in the EU, the GDPR. And there are issues in provision of technology related to equity we want to pay attention to. I do anticipate on the antitrust front that at least one of these companies will not be intact in 3 years. It's possible that all three of them will be broken up. You know, it's obvious as an easy to break up AWS from Amazon. Google will be harder. Facebook, if they peel off Instagram and WhatsApp from Facebook, then you have competing services. Again, I'll let the DOJ worry about it, but a lot of lawyers are going to make a lot of money off this battle. Social media, we're closer to a tipping point. The amount of deceptive content that was distributed over the last year, the concerns about Section 230 and who was responsible for false, misleading, or libelous information is important. There has been a decline in use of some social media providers and new competitors, TikTok and Parler. And again, I could go on for a day or two just on the story of Parler, of what happened and why. Same with TikTok. This is a very active arena that's going to continue to grow and change. Anyway, getting back to the network, this is where we all started. Everything's requiring new bandwidth. And the challenge is, how do we keep the network secure? We all know not just the solar winds, but other instances of hacking, spear phishing. We know that where there is value, people are going to try to exploit the value. So we've got to make sure the networks are not only constructed, but managed with an eye toward protecting the information, protecting the value of the information. The final point I want to make is what I like to call the magic window point. And this is a place where I'll disagree with Larry. And near the end of his presentation, he talked about different ways to present information. I think the screen has actually become one of the primary ways we can share, because a screen becomes what I call a magic window. With a screen, you can see anything. I can take a look at what's going on in Austin. I can take a look at what's going on in London. I can watch what's going on in DC, or I can go back to Westeros and see what's happening there. So I think that the more we realize the power of this magic window, the more capable we're going to be of appreciating and anticipating the changes that are coming. So my conclusion: the place we're going to be by the end of this year is where we expected to be in 2025. The pace of change has been so fast this year. The ability of organizations to adapt to the change and use technologies they never used before to quickly pivot. That's going to be something that's going to be with us. So with that, obviously I'm around for questions now. I'm going to bounce out of this. Let me stop sharing. Okay, and then I can look to see whether there are any questions or comments, because I told you could make comments anywhere along the way. All right.
Augie, there are a few. Just start right underneath where it says "Welcome, Augie Communications."
I got it. Okay, you got it. Looking for the launch of Strum later this year to AgriCon. I'm looking forward to that too. Again, the question is, will the providers be willing to make the deals, or are they going to try to keep all the money for themselves? So that's I agree that that's one we want to look at, but and there will be others that are out there. The question is it going to be an independent service, or is it going to be a service that buys up others? I found it very interesting how the price of Viacom stock has gone up significantly the past week. Somebody, I think, is getting ready to buy Viacom, and if they do, whatever was going to be on Paramount Plus will end up on that platform. Let's see, Bill says any technology for cheap wide range cameras, especially can be layers with the screen. I don't know about camera technology. I mean, I've been following light field technology. I think your biggest advances are going to come from, instead of using the camera technology we've had for the last more than 200 years, it's based on the lens and on trying to capture a two-dimensional image. The light field technology, which can capture three-dimension, has a great deal of potential for giving us holography. But I don't know about other wide-range camera, Bill. I just, I don't know. Gary, HR conflict of working from home versus returning to the office. There's short-term, long-term, the prospective potential long-term implications. Yes. To me, the biggest long-term implication of working from home is the social implications. One of the things that we all know the term water cooler talk. We all know how important it is to get to know workers by going to lunch with them, by hanging out with them. And a lot of times you not only have ideas that stem from that, but we learn how other people think. We learn why they think or why they do the things. And unless we spend as much time on our screens as we do, and frankly, it's hard to share a cup of coffee on a screen. So I think, but I think it'll vary widely. There are some jobs, you know, if I'm trying to edit a video, it's a very solo project. I can do that as easily at a workstation at home. And I think, you know, Hunter can tell us about that. But there are other things. If I'm trying to compose and perform a soundtrack for a movie, I need the musicians. I want the musicians together. I want to see how they act and interact with each other. That same collaboration happens in other team things. So I think we'll have an increase over a year ago in the number of people working at home. But again, I think that the combination of the importance of social interactions and the insecurity of supervisors who want control are going to give us going to bring more and more people back to the office. There's one other issue there psychologically. Going to the office gives you a separation. If your workspace is your home space, you can find yourself working at all hours of the day. And I'm looking at Helen Mary's picture right now. Helen Mary and I have collaborated on this communication technology update book since 1992. Yeah, there she's got it on her desk too. But I know she doesn't work a 9-to-5 schedule, and her schedule's even more flexible since she works from home. Again, I don't mean to put you on the spot there, Helen Mary, but the whole idea that there is this freedom that comes and control that comes from working at home that you don't have. But by the same token, if your computer is your work device and you're also doing it on your phone, then anytime someone can reach you, all of a sudden your work time becomes 24 hours a day. Sometimes it's good to be able to have an office, whether it's a home office, whether it's a work office. You go in the morning, at the end of the day, you shut the door and say, I'm done for the day. And by the way, when I learn how to do that, I'll tweet about it. I'm not there yet. So let's see. Here's a question about smart washers. Is there some form of gaming where the pieces are played by the player, multiple players, cross-country dome races? I don't know. Bill, I know there's, with a lot of the role-playing games, there are a lot of people who work together and collaborate. That's the whole thing behind Fortnite. But I've got to stress, I'm not a gamer, so I'll have to let someone else weigh in on that. Smart washer will tell when you're putting in the wrong clothing for the treatment. Yes. That would be a good thing to have. Write it up, get a patent on it. Point was made, some people get dizzy with gaming. Latency level that eliminates the situation. There is something called, it's not actually a latency that causes it. It's actually a function of the realism. They call it the uncanny valley. As things get more realistic, people enjoy it. And then at a certain point of realism, their enjoyment goes down. And then you get even more realistic, they enjoy it again. But it's not the latency, Rosella. It's the actual fact that when you are looking at something and your inner ear is used to an orientation, gravity is coming from here, but with the head-mounted device, gravity may be coming from another direction. It's very disorienting. So Bill says, talking about the field of view holography, looking for mobile handheld like a magic window. Yeah, I agree, Bill. We've got a lot of technology going. I don't know about the drone leg. So, and I think we got about 1 minute left. So time for one more question or comment, or disagreement. If anybody wants to jump in and correct me on anything, I like to learn, and I know this group is one of the best groups to learn from around.
Augie, I will admit that I don't think the screens are going to go away by any means at all. I need to fix that slide so it's not such a substitution of one for the other. I just think we'll have a lot more than screens to go forward.
I think there's such power in the screen because there's a user control, and it recognizes that you're in a real environment. You can take part of yourself and put it in another environment. Google Street View, such a great thing for exploring. Peloton has taken the Google Street View and put it on steroids, but they don't do it with an HMD. They do it with the screen. I didn't even talk about Peloton.
Okay, any last chance for questions for Augie? Well, as always, Augie, thanks a whole bunch.
Thank you so much.
You did a good job.
Buy my book.
Yeah, buy Augie's book.